Hi, it's Jodi Medell, Doctor of Physical Therapy and Transformational Coach, welcoming you back to another episode of the Three Pillars of Fitness. The Three Pillars of Fitness are mobility, stability, and strength, in that order. This is where we focus on working on our mobility first, followed by stability, followed by strength. Mobility and stability can be pretty closely tied or close together, because once we get mobility around the joint, we certainly want to be able to stabilize it to make it safe and healthy for further strengthening, which is the third component of the Three Pillars of Fitness. Today we're going to begin our journey on the hip joint. So in this segment, we're going to talk about mobility of the hip joint. I'm going to spend some time talking about basic mobility, warming up the hip joint. After that, I'm going to do some dynamic stretching to some basic muscles that surround the hip joint. Again, this list is not exhaustive. It's just to get you started on your program for either rehab or beginning a fitness regime for yourself, okay? So the first one I want to do is the equivalent of the pendulum that I showed you in the shoulder, but now for the hip. So let's go back here so you can see me. All right. What we're going to do is we're simply swinging our leg back and forth. And when we do this, we're going back to the concepts that I brought about in the pendulum for the shoulder. This is about letting the hip joint distract or open up from its socket. And so you're just allowing momentum to carry it to and fro or forward and back. We're going to do this about 10 times, and it's 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. So it's a 2 for 1. And you're just doing it at least 10 times to help warm you up. As soon as you feel like you're warmed up, you can move on. And this is where we start adding an internal rotation, meaning we point our toe in as we go forward, and then we point our toe out as we go back. Let me step back just a little bit further, maybe you can see me better. But as you go forward, you're going to point your toe in. As you go back, you're going to point your toe out. The whole idea is to take our hip joint and rotate it in, rotate it out. In, out, in, out. And again, it's not forced. You're not forcing it in, forcing it out. You're allowing the hip joint to distract. You're using momentum to go forward and back. But now you're just angling in, angling out, so that you get that hip rotation. The whole idea of this exercise, of this mobilization exercise, is to increase the synovial fluid in that hip joint to allow for easier movement. Okay, and again, it's a 2 for 1, 1. Great. So each movement, forward and back, equals 1 combined. So again, do at least 10. Whatever it takes for you to warm up is what you want to do. So the first one, just forward and back. The second one, toe in, toe out. And again, one more time, I can't emphasize enough the importance of letting yourself feel that hip joint distract coming out of the socket as you mobilize it to and fro, internal and external. Perfect. All right, now we're going to warm up the posterior chain. The posterior chain are the muscles that reside on the back side of us. It includes the glutes, the hamstrings, the calves. Because we're focusing on the hip joint, we're going to focus this one on the glutes and the hammies. This is called a good morning. You can use a PVC. This is a 10 foot, come on, Joe, get your words out today. A 10-foot PVC cut in half, so it's a 5-foot PVC, 3/4 inch. You can get it easily at your Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, whatever. Or you can use a broomstick or a ski pole, whatever you have. So we're going to take this, we're going to rest it on the meat of our back, so our traps, we're resting it there. We're not pushing it against our neck at all. We're going down a little bit more so that we're on the meat of our back, our muscles. And what we're going to do with a good morning is we're going to keep our feet hip to shoulder width apart. I like shoulder width better. You're going to keep your knees soft. They're not too bent, they're not locked out, but they're just relaxed so that you can feel your muscles engaged. We're gonna honor the line that we have in the front, going from our sternum to our pubic symphysis, sternum to pubic symphysis. We're honoring that line, meaning we're taking the curves of our back in their natural state and holding it by using our internal core stabilizers. And then we're keeping this line constant, so we're not tucking our pelvis under, we're not sticking our pelvis out, hence changing the lines, changing the line in front, either shortening it or lengthening it. We're holding it constant, so we're not doing anything to our spine at all. We're keeping it constant. It's a plank. The only movement we're going to do in this, as we keep our knees soft and our feet are shoulder width apart and we honor the line, the only movement is hip flexion, hip extension. So we're going to go into hip flexion until we feel a good stretch from our glutes to the back of our knees. As soon as we feel that, we're pushing through our heels and coming back up to standing. We're feeling the stretch. We're coming off of it. This is a dynamic stretch. So when we think of dynamic stretching, we're thinking our fascia, and our fascia is made up mostly of water. So we think fluidity, we think massagey, we think constant movement. So in order to get a good dynamic stretch, we're going into the stretch for 2 seconds, and we're coming off of the stretch for 2 seconds. And we're keeping that dynamic. So here we go. Again, keeping in consideration the line in the front, that we're not changing it. Our feet are shoulder width apart, and we're simply doing hip flexion, extension, and our knees are soft. So we're on for 2, off for 2. 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 Okay, so that is called a good morning. That is stretching the posterior chain or the glutes and the hamstrings. It's a dynamic stretch, so it's addressing the fascial layers that cover the muscles. So it needs to be in constant motion. So we're feeling the stretch for 2, coming off the stretch for 2, feeling it for 2, coming off of it for 2. And again, it's simply hip flexion, hip extension, knees are soft, stance is shoulder width apart. We're honoring the line from our sternum to our pubic symphysis. We want to repeat that at least 10 times. If you're not feeling good and warmed up after 10, you can move up to 3 sets of 10. So do it once, take a break, or 1 set, take a break, do another set, take a break, another set, take a break. Whatever you need to feel like you're truly warmed up and your muscles feel nice and fluid for you. Perfect, okay. The next stretch we're going to do is to hit our adductors. Those are the muscles inside our legs. I want to point out that any stretch we do should not take us to an end range. It should be where we're creating the setup so that it's not an extreme act to get the stretch. All right, so with this one, we're going to go wider than hip width apart. We're going to go as wide as we feel comfortable. Again, we're going to keep honoring our line here because we only want the hip joint moving. We don't want anything else moving here. And we're simply going from one side. Make sure that as you bend your knee is as much as you can staying over, and you can put your feet into a little bit of external rotation. And so your knee should always be over your toe, okay? Not beyond it. So somewhere between your ankle and your toe. So you're simply hanging out over here to get a stretch to this adductor muscle here. And then you're moving to the other side. And you're leaning into it, meaning just dropping your weight down to the ground to get that stretch on that inner thigh. Again, we're stretching more of the fascia than we are focusing on muscle specific. So it's the fascia surrounding the adductors that we're stretching. And so again, we want to keep that fluidity. On for 2, on for 2, on for 2, on for 2. Because fascia, again, made up of water, requires movement. And so we want to feel it for 2, feel the other side for 2. And again, it's a twofer. So 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Move up to 10 reps. If you don't feel warmed up, take a break, do 10 more. If you still don't feel warmed up, add 1 more set, okay? So those are the adductors. The third one we want to focus on is the quads. So we are going to hold on to something. We're going to hold our, from our ankle, we're going to pull our knee up behind us or pull our leg up behind us, bending at the knee, so we need knee flexion. We're going to attempt to make our legs parallel. All right, so our knees, our thighs should be parallel to one another. And in this, if you already feel a stretch, you can go into a little bit more flexion, bring that knee forward so that you're a little bit off stretch, all right? But hopefully holding right here, you're feeling maybe a mild stretch, but not anything too aggressive. What you're gonna do to create the stretch for the quad is squeeze your butt. Squeezing your butt elongates that rectus or the fascia around the quads and allows for it to be stretched. So you're simply squeezing your butt. Again, any stretch we do, we should not be at some extreme end range of motion. We should be somewhere in the middle, and we should be isolating what it is we want to focus on. And in this case, it's the quads. So you're squeezing your butt for 2, relaxing for 2. Squeezing your butt for 2, relaxing for 2. Squeezing your butt muscles for 2, relaxing for 2. And again, squeezing your butt muscles for 2 and relaxing for 2. If this is where you're feeling the stretch, then instead of squeezing your butt, you're simply going to pull back until you feel a good stretch for 2 and bring it forward. Pull back, bring it forward. So wherever you are in that range of stretching, you have a couple of options as to how you get the most effective stretch for you. But again, this is dynamic. So on for 2, off for 2, on for 2, off for 2. Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the final 2 stretches, and those are going to focus on the hip rotator muscles. So our glutes as a whole, and then specifically our piriformis. So I'm going to put the camera on the floor. Hopefully you can see me well. All right, I'm gonna face this way because I think it's important for you to see this. All right, so if we're stretching our glutes, what we're going to do is we're going to put our heel on our opposite knee, okay? And when we're stretching the glutes, you're going to relax your head. I'm up just so I can talk to you. But as you do the stretch, you're simply pulling your other thigh in towards you. And again, we're keeping this dynamic. So you're pulling in for 2, relaxing for 2. Pulling in for 2, relaxing for 2. Pulling in for 2, relaxing for 2. Pulling in for 2, and relaxing for 2. Okay, so that's the glutes. Your leg is simply relaxed. Your heel is on your opposite thigh, and you're pulling that opposite thigh in towards you. And again, because the stretch is focused on the fascia, we're doing a dynamic stretch of on for 2, off for 2. Repeat 10 times. If it's not a good enough stretch, do a whole other set. If that's still not enough, do a third set. And switch sides so that you're doing both legs. Okay, piriformis. I like to do piriformis with, I'm going to keep my other leg straight so that you can see what's going on. To change it from a glute stretch to a piriformis stretch, you saw with the glute, the knee was angled out. On the piriformis stretch, we need to have that knee right over our belly button and not have it changed, okay? I'm going to put this back up. The reason we bend the opposite knee is to help stabilize our pelvis so that our pelvis isn't cockeyed, it's even. So important to keep that opposite knee bent as you're doing this exercise. But what I want you to really see and get is that to stretch piriformis, the knee needs to hang out over the belly button and stay there. It's not out like this, as you saw in the glute stretch. So knee over belly button. We're going to stabilize it with the same side hand. The other hand is going to grab the ankle and pull into internal or external rotation. Pull, the hip is going into external rotation, but the ankle is coming in towards you. So you're not letting that knee move from on top of your belly button, but you're going to pull in, feel that stretch to the piriformis, and let it go for 2. Feel the stretch for 2. Let it go for 2. Feel the stretch for 2. Let it go for 2. And one more time. Feel the stretch for 2 and let it go. So again, head is going to be relaxed. I was just looking up so I could see you. And again, fascial stretch. So you're doing it dynamically. So you're on the stretch for 2, you're relaxing for 2, on for 2, off for 2. For both of the stretches on the floor, the glute stretch and the piriformis stretch, remember the opposite knee is bent simply to stabilize the pelvis. And the difference between the glute stretch and the piriformis stretch is that with the glute stretch, knee is hanging out to the side. With the piriformis stretch, knee has to be over the belly button and not move from that position. All right, enjoy these hip mobility exercises. And next time we'll come back with hip stability exercises before we move into hip strengthening. Have a great day.